Welcome to Season 5, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's August 22nd here. We're about to pump out the new season. I got at least 12 episodes in the queue. I think all of them night episodes, but hopefully they've got the goods. Hope you guys dug the new intro. I worked on that quite a bit. I got so much extra footage from what I was putting together. So what I'm going to do with the Season 5 intro, because intros are kind of, the music's always going to stay the same, but I'm going to keep tweaking it from time to time. So you're going to see that intro change as I push myself through some more visual effects. And there's just some things I wanted to do, which I wasn't able to kind of push it all together. Plus, I want to tap a few friends of mine and see what they come up with. So we'll make that fun. It'll be kind of like The Simpsons, when it starts, it's always different. Now, it's not going to be different every single time, but it'll be different on a nice, surprising interval. So we'll have some fun with that. And what would a Season 5 intro with a flying saucer be without an opening episode about a gentleman who said he worked on secret UFOs in a secret base called S4, a gentleman by the name of Bob Lazar. And so I've been thinking about this guy and wanting to cover him for a long time, and then just miraculously last year they came out with a documentary on him, which I saw this year. And I have this obviously a soft spot for the subject matter, because like most of you who would love to believe that we have neighbors in the universe, to also have completed this communication thing where we found each other in the universe. It's exciting, isn't it? That would be the storyline. Now, I've followed Bob since I heard of the guy, which is probably in the 90s on television shows. I was there with everybody else. Then when YouTube came out, a lot of old footage from the 90s, like, interviews with him and town hall meetings, with a whole group of people. And so I've been on the Lazar bandwagon. I listened to his buddy John Lear talk at length. I think John Lear's certifiable. I think that he is a bad psyop if he is not crazy. And he could be either one. I think that I watched the whole Bob Lazar documentary and I thought, well, man, this is like totally even more real than I thought before. But then I started thinking logically, as we do on this show, and a bunch of stuff doesn't make sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the official story of this guy. Then we're going to ask some serious questions about this dude, because I think there's something extremely endearing about Bob's character, right? He's not one of these dudes who exudes any need to have attention. Even if that's what he does need, he doesn't give off a single quaff of that vibe. His story is generally stayed the same from the very beginning. I think that I've heard him say that, we're going to get into it, but of the ships that he witnessed in this secret bunker, which is underneath a mountain, sort of like the mountainside. It's just like James Bond, man. The doors are painted to look like the mountain, and so when they fall back, all of a sudden there's an opening, and then you go inside. And the only reason why those doors exist is because at some point you need to take the crafts out. But as I first heard the story from him in the 90s, I tried to find this video of him saying this, but a lot of his old videos have been wiped out. And in place of those old videos, there is the new documentary. It's almost like they cleaned up the story of this guy to push it out there. We know that there's been this buzz on the internet for the last 5 to 10 years. For those people who were paying attention to von Braun's secretary from 1978 up, when he died, the story about a fake alien invasion to unify the world because at this stage, freedom is starting to poke its head up like the rose bush that's growing out of the nuclear waste of our current society. And so they need to kind of pull us all together. So why not brush the dust off of people like Bob Lazar, clean up the story? But there's counter theories to that idea as well, because if they really wanted to blow the dust off this guy and clean him up, someone would find some of the records of his existence beyond the one entry in the Los Alamos Labs phone book. Well, we'll get into that as well. So Bob Lazar is born on, I think it's January 26, 1959. He's currently 60 years old. The documentary actually opened up a lot more information about his past that I didn't know anything about, which was his utter obsession with jet engines. And that he actually had this car that he would take to events, and it would have the jet engine in the back, and he'd do a little stunt driving it and what have you. I didn't know anything about that at all. And I didn't know anything about his current business, which is making fireworks, which is cool. If you go into his Wikipedia, it says that he's a film processor. Not sure exactly what category of film processing he's in. I don't care, quite frankly. I never heard about him engaging in illegal acts like running a brothel and getting busted in the early 90s, where he literally is a felon. Can't own a gun, can't vote. He's a felon, but he only had to serve like 150 days in community service. So in terms of obeying the laws of this country of ours, he perceives himself outside that. He's not a Hugh Hefner, so maybe just the sheer the sheer high of being around women and everybody being accessible, maybe that was part of it. Like he's his own Dr. Detroit, Have you ever seen that Dan Aykroyd movie? There is a weird psychological thing for me, because the uncle I always tell you guys about that taught me everything, they look similar. They have a very similar appearance. And so for me, there's part of that is just that vibe of integrity and amazing brilliance. The same kind of things that Bob Lazar knows and studies are the same exact things that my uncle studied and taught me. So the story as it goes is that you have, because we have to kind of jump around in time to get this thing to match the way that Bob talks about his own life. And then we have to go back and then do the research on his claims. Because what happened to this whole thing? I believe that the first official kind of outward-facing step that Bob did was he went to a guy named George Knapp, Knapp. George Knapp was I think he still is, but he was a kind of an investigative journalist for the Las Vegas TV station KLAS. And he said, I'm about to break something. I've been working at this special facility, which is a spinoff of Area 51 called S4. I've been working on this UFO, and it has an antimatter engine that is far beyond anything mankind has ever conceived of or created in our current era. The materials of which the ship are made out of completely beyond anything that we've ever messed with. The propulsion system is using an element 115, which we haven't synthesized yet because this was the early 90s. We don't understand antimatter that well. And there's 9 craft in total, 8 other craft that I didn't work on. He calls his craft, because it was uninjured and it looked cool, the sports model. The initial testimonies I heard from him, out of his own voice, with his own face, was that the other 8 were injured in some way, shape, or fashion. They had been shot down, they had mechanical functions, whatever the case might have been. They were all damaged, and his was perfect. First time I ever heard him talk about walking out to this craft, he said that he wasn't allowed to look at the other craft. He did out of the kind of corner of his eye. But now he never seems to mention those sort of militant circumstances around his employment. But he goes to this George Knapp guy and he says, look, I'm in trouble. I think I'm about to get fired. I want to bust this story wide open. So I'm going to take you around to some places where you can get clearance to verify that I do work at these facilities or have worked for these facilities or gone through these facilities to get to where I go. And then we'll do like a shrouded interview, where he is shrouded in a shadow, which they made him sit in a Bronco and they filmed him and he gave his testimony that he was doing this, and they broke it on, the news one evening. It seemed like it was live. Then, of course, he does get fired, and so now he doesn't give a crap, and now he goes on camera, starts telling the whole story. Everything I just told you. The George Knapp guy's like, well, I don't know if I believe this guy yet, so let me do my investigation. I don't know when they found his name in the Los Alamos lab phone book. The big thing about that is that you could be a male guy. It doesn't say Bob Lazar, physicist. It just says Bob Lazar and a number. Supposedly Knapp talked to people that said at the Air Force Base or wherever he took off to go to Area 51, which is in a plane supposedly with no windows for the passengers, and they said, oh yeah, that guy works at Area 51. Okay. So George is pretty convinced. And then they arranged the sort of coup de grace to his integrity, which is to do a lie detector test. Now, I have heard in Coast to Coast AM, I'm pretty sure in the early 2000s, that Bob Lazar was given literally nearly 36 lie detector tests. But in the documentary and all the recent stuff I've seen, he's only had one lie detector test. And it was the testimony of the dude who gave him the test, where he said, look, I don't know if this guy really works on UFOs, but he thinks he does, because he gave no physical indication that he's lying. All right. And we all want Bob to win. We want him to win. Yes. Prove that you have this background, that you went and did this, and then prove to us that you truly worked on a UFO. But now let's break for a second on this idea, because there are people who are great storytellers. Most of them are authors, writers, Michael Crichton's. I mean, if they took the story of Jurassic Park, for instance, finding an amber encapsulated mosquito with the DNA of a dinosaur in it, and then told the public that they are now synthesizing dinosaurs in some far-off island somewhere, and they had done it, and they pushed this rumor out there, I think most people, due to the fact that it has credibility, it has a scientific theory to it, the layman especially, not maybe a microbiologist or someone who knows genetics, genetic engineering, maybe they would be like, you're ridiculous, that'll never work. But the layman's going to believe it. So I'm here to tell you that I haven't heard a single thing from Bob Lazar that I wouldn't credit someone in his era, being born in 59, growing up through a great educational system, the 60s and the 70s, which means Bob graduates high school roughly in 1978. The school systems were fantastic. The creativity that they taught was fantastic. The science that they taught was fantastic. There's a reason why my uncle had the same level of intellectual prowess. I mean, just legit science. So we can't rule out, in my opinion, the fact that Bob could just be one of the most creative and brilliant people in his field of fiction. We know he built, turbine cars, turbine vehicles. We know that he understands a tremendous amount of science due to his United Nuclear Company. He's just a gadget guy, no matter what is true. He's a gadget guy. I mean, the guy can build fireworks and he can film process, whatever the fuck that means. So he's gifted. But now, what do they say about this guy? Because we're going to dig deeper now. He claims to have a physics degree from MIT and Caltech. Now, he has proof that in 1970, which I don't quite understand, or in the 70s, I should say, he went to a Pierce Junior College in Los Angeles. Okay, I'm a junior college kid as well. That is why I do not have a degree. I went to college as a mere recreational thing. Almost paused my career in the early 90s to go off and get a degree, and was talked out of it by my second cousin who's got a PhD in chemistry, and he said, why waste your time doing that? And he goes, I wasted 10, 12 years of my life in college, and I lost all those beautiful years. He goes, don't do that. You already know how to do what you do. Just keep doing it. Keep educating yourself. Which was a stunner. I thought that guy would be, yeah, great, get your degree. Nope. He's like, don't waste your life. He ran Merck Pharmaceutical for a couple decades. He's a genius. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll stick to my guns. And it was very good that I did, because what happened to my life literally that year was utterly phenomenal. Caltech is in Pasadena, California. MIT is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I lived in Massachusetts for 2.5 years, and my father and I would routinely go on little drives on the weekend because he's a photographer. And we just drive by the Harvard and Caltech MIT, excuse me. And I love science, and so going by these institutions, even though I could barely conceive of what they were, I knew that they were the top schools in the world, and I would have been an MIT kid, not a Harvard kid. Caltech is huge. Around here, it is the number one tech school in the world, bar none. So, let's review. He says he has degrees, physics degrees no less, from the top tech schools in the world, meaning the curriculum by which you have to study to get degrees at these schools is of the utmost complexity. Except, what's the problem? The problem is, he doesn't have any proof. And so what is the big cover story for him not having proof he went to these two top tech schools? A degree from each one of them. Unbelievable, the claim on this dude. First, let me just tell you, if someone's going to tell a bold lie, and again, I mentioned this episode a lot, but in the Twilight Zone series, go look up Frisbee. The Great Frisbee, I think it was what the title of the episode is. It's an old man who owns a convenience store who perpetually lies about all the degrees he has. I think he had his degrees up to like 36 degrees or something like that, 32, 36 degrees, and all these things. No matter what you mentioned, he invented it, and he broke all the world records, etc., etc. It's a fantastic episode. It's where the Rick Gervais movie about a world that didn't understand a lie. That's where that episode was lifted from. It's also where the end of Mars Attack was lifted from, with the harmonica. He had a harmonica he played, and it would freak out the aliens. And the aliens in Mars Attack would listen to I want to say Roy Orbison, but it may not be that. But that old country song that blew up their brains, right? Anyway, if you were a person who needed to sort of validate yourself in a scientific way, those are the two schools you would lie about. If you really understood where the two best schools in the world would be, you'd say. Now, okay. If you're going to go to school, how does this work? How does your undergrad work? 4 years. And if you are accomplishing a degree in less than 4 years, there are going to be people on campus who remember you graduating faster than 4 years in your undergrad. Now, in the notes that I find online, I don't know which degree he said he got, whether one was an undergrad or one was his graduate degree. I don't have that information. But we're going to cover it. Because what's your graduate degree usually take? It usually takes about 3 years. 2 if you're really aggressive. So he says that they erased his records. And technically speaking, when they say they have no records of you doing this and no records of that, okay, so you get rid of records, that just means they formally didn't write it down, or they got rid of any papers that said they wrote it down. That's not enough to disbelieve someone in his particular situation. It's very cleverly stated, as a matter of fact, by these institutions to remove liability should they be caught in the lie. But now let me ask you, and this just happened to me in the last 24 hours of studying this and rethinking it through. I think he's lying about both degrees, and I'll tell you why. I unequivocally think he's lying about both degrees. Doesn't mean he's not a genius and that he wouldn't be solicited by someone, but we're going to get into how he got into this program in the first place, which is also rather difficult to believe. How many of you went to college? 4 years. 4-year college. One, if you go to a 4-year college, you don't usually go to a junior college first. If you're capable of getting in to MIT and Caltech, a couple things are true. You don't need a junior college unless you're doing it as a teenager simply to get some prerequisites all worked out, get some credits going. Now, just so that you know, a Harvard law degree today costs $500,000. One of my friends sent his kid in. He got his degree, graduated top in his class. I don't know what a physics degree cost at MIT, and I don't know what it would have cost in, say, 78. Let's just say he comes right out of high school, goes straight into MIT. I am willing to bet that degree, you could buy a Corvette for $8,000. So his family would have had to have coughed up a lot of money. I'm going to say at least $100,000 to get him the tuition fees to go through MIT. That doesn't account for, because he would have been there when I was there. If he went off to MIT first, he would have been there in the early 80s, right when I moved there. It would have been extremely expensive to live there. Boston is not a cheap place. Okay. So, any of you who've sent your kid off to college, or any of you who've just been there and your parents were with you, there's a lot of logistics going on. You've got to get a place to live. You have an address. And if you spend 4 years in an educational institution, there weren't cell phones and there weren't cameras around everywhere, but you would take a picture of being there. You take a picture of the campus, you take a picture of your friends, and you would have friends from college. You always do. Where's Bob Lazar's friends? I mean, I don't give a shit if the dude says, I was in nerd and I didn't have any friends. That's bullshit. I have spent my entire life hanging out with the jocks on one side, the mutts in the middle where I belonged, and the nerds on the left. Friends with all three groups. I know that every single one of these folks has a best friend from these institutions. At least one. At least one. Why isn't he pulling those people into the documentary and saying, well, this is Bob. He went to MIT as well. There's his degree. Bob, do you remember me? His name's Bob. I shouldn't use that. But Dan, Dan, hey, Dan got a degree in physics as well. He's right there beside me. Here's a photograph of he and I at our graduation. What happens when you graduate? Let's say one of two things has occurred here. His family came up with whatever money it cost, $7,500 to get him to MIT. And then he graduates? He gets a degree in physics? Well, what happens when that happens? You get a book, you get your gown, you get your tassel, you get photographs taken of you, your family comes out to see you graduate, your relatives know you graduated, the whole family would know, all your friends would know. Are you going to not tell your friends you went to MIT? Seriously? And in 4 years you never took any pictures? And maybe he claims he went to Caltech first, just apply everything over. It's absurd that he has absolutely no personal records of ever going to MIT, and that nobody ever remembers him at either institution. The CIA can't kill every single person who saw a student at a particular college. They wouldn't even know who remembered the guy. Professors would have records of these prodigy kids coming through the school. Obviously, Bob Lazar, according to his own claims, is a prodigy. He would have sailed through. My physics teacher in high school remembers me 100%. He said I was his number 2 student of his whole career. Number 1 did Google Maps port from Windows to Mac. My physics teacher thinks he invented it, so that's why he's number one. But whatever. But my physics teacher, 20 years after, no shit, yeah, well, at least 20 years after I had walked out of his class for the last time, sat on the phone with the guy, and he's remembering multiple events in school. I remember the first time I asked you about black holes. I remember the first time we talked about E equals MC squared. You were such a pain in the ass. Da, 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 da. He remembers me. Nobody remembers Bob Lazar. You don't have any professors who were in their 20s or early 30s who are still alive today we could talk to. I know people die, but damn, Bob is not that old. Bob is 60 years old today. There are professors who are probably 10 to 15 years older than him, which means today they're only 75 years old, not dead. Somebody should remember this guy. I mean, you get my point. But don't let that slide. Where was his address? Don't you have some mail from those eras? Don't you have something? When I went to Boston, here's something about Boston you need to understand. It's a tourist trap of tourist traps. It is the Lexington Bridge foundational land that this revolution was fought on, from the first shot that's shot on the Lexington Bridge to the last time we kicked people out in 1812. It's a long war, man. He would have pictures with him next to the Minuteman, the Ironside, someplace, beach pictures, whatever. He would have gotten out and done some stuff. No evidence at all. Now, somebody said, again, this is just absolute hearsay, but somebody said, look, in Los Angeles, I remember taking Bob to Caltech to drop him off at school. Okay, well, I used to go to Stanford all the time. I never was a Stanford student. So maybe he went to Caltech. Rewind all those claims that we just made for MIT and put them against Caltech. You went to the number one science school on this thing we call planet Earth, and you have no evidence. You have no diploma papers. You've got no pictures of ever being there. You have no friends from Caltech that remember you. It's, I think, a physical and mental impossibility that he has degrees from either one of these places and has nothing to show for it. Zero. They pointed a camera at him during a documentary. He didn't say, okay, come on back to my room. He moves a couple books out of the way, pulls out his degrees, and shows them to the camera. None of that ever happened. Here's a photograph, 1, 2, 3 of me in Massachusetts over 4 years. Okay, here's a 3-year degree, graduate degree from Caltech. Can you really get two undergrad degrees? No, one of them's got to be a graduate degree, one of them's got to be an undergrad. You just have to have it that way. MIT definitely acknowledges Caltech's degrees, and Caltech definitely acknowledges MIT degrees, so you would step up. But now some people say, okay, I got you. But he's in the phone book at Los Alamos Labs, and the answer is definitely yes, he is. I don't think anyone carries around the name Bob Lazar. What's great about his name is that Lazar is an extremely unique name. So finding it in a directory is great evidence that something happened. But now, how does he get involved with this incredibly covert project? Well, the truth of the matter is that if you were a star student, one, everybody would remember you. Again, okay, there'd be dozens of people that would know Bob Lazar was the kid who just burned through school like, a hot iron through butter. You get remembered for those kind of things. He said he met William Teller, the dude who invents the hydrogen bomb. And that Teller said, you're a genius, you're great, we need some new minds because we've stalled out on this project. Can't tell you what it is just yet, but you'll find out, and I'm going to get you through all the security checks, and we're going to evaluate your brain a little bit further, and I'm going to get you into this S4 project. One, this means that Teller's walking around with S4 knowledge and alien knowledge and all this other stuff. Now Teller, he says that he doesn't remember Bob. But he was kind of gentle about it. He was like, I'm not saying I'm an old man, so I don't remember everybody I meet. I'm famous, so what can you do, man? You meet people and you don't remember. But now think about it. Teller. This is like us having a conversation with Teller. Mr. Teller. I understand if you don't remember putting your pants on. I understand if you don't recall what you had for breakfast and it's evening today. I understand those kind of like slips and thoughts, right? But now think about it. How many times do you think about the fact that human beings are supposedly in contact with aliens and we have 9 of their ships, and you found a guy that you thought was appropriate to push into the program to study the antimatter engines of the best UFO we have? You don't remember that? So, if Teller did participate in Bob Lazar's progression and introduction into this program, then he's lying. If he did. Definitely lying. You don't forget that kind of stuff. Long-term memory for people losing their short-term memory due to Alzheimer's or dementia. You remember your long-term stuff. You don't remember anything that happened recently. Case in point, my grandmother who passed away of dementia. She had dementia or some sort. I never saw her have dementia because when I walked in the door, I'm long-term memory. She called out my name immediately. We had a great time, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But those who took care of her on a daily basis said, man, she didn't know where she was half the time. Short-term memory. Okay. So Bob bounces through. Now, so according to Bob and this George Knapp who does investigations on him, he bounces through. I guess you have to be evaluated at Area 51 and then you get pulled into S4. I don't think that there were any tasks that Bob talked about at Area 51 that really mattered to him other than maybe test flying some of these things, which means they have to open those gates up, fly the ship out, get it over to S4 somehow quietly, and then just using the controlled airspace, they're flying it up and down and moving it around. The reason why they procured this guy is that recently, he said, this is a new twist I'd never heard in the past, that they mothball the project every 10 years. So they put all these vehicles away, wait for technology to grow up a little bit, wait till minds grow up a little bit. I mean, can you imagine in the middle of this horrible vacuum of education, you're waiting for anyone to get smarter? Jeez, you have to mothball this thing for 1,000 years. At the current rate we're going, right? But back in Bob's day, education was good. So he supposedly spends, if he's so normal time period. Don't forget the Pierce Junior College he goes to. So we got to add that onto the credit system that he's going for. And I don't think MIT or Caltech is going to recognize Pierce Junior College credits. So if he spent 2 years in that, I don't know how many years they said. They don't say. You got to add that in. So let's say Pierce Junior College never happened, which we actually have proof that happened. Okay, maybe he did it in junior high school, who knows. You got 7-year track. If you don't get out early, you have a 7-year track to get a 4-year degree and a 3-year degree. All right. So he's in this program for a very short period of time. Meanwhile, his whereabouts are pretty well accounted for because he's building these turbine jet vehicles. So that pretty much when you film him at some event with a turbine jet vehicle, well, he's got to have time to build the damn thing, and he's got to have time to drag it out. Where has he got all this time to go get a degree, let alone 2, at the 2 most formidable scientific colleges in the world? I'm just saying. Fucking explain it to me, man. We're sitting around. If Bob's sitting right there, I give him this much crap and say, look, dude, if you're legit, then we're just not looking in the right places, and you've been looking in the wrong place for 30 plus years. George Knapp's sitting in front of me. I'd say, look, man, how do you account for all this missing time? And why aren't you able to apply basic logic to this? You're an investigative reporter. This is your job to have this kind of mind, right? So we sort of have him at home building these things. He's famous for it. We've got lots of footage of him with all of his cool inventions. Again, the guy is smart, okay? Probably certifiably a genius in the areas that he has talked about this information, whether he fictionally made it up. I mean, Robert Heinlein theorized the nuclear bomb before it ever had ever been blown up. And supposedly the government came to him and said, how do you know about this? Because the Manhattan Project was a complete covert project. We know what occurred because the bunch of people that worked for the place, 10,000 employees or something like that, they've all given their testimonies, all these women and men, they all, that really did exist. But they arrested Heinlein sort of detained him, I should say, to ask him, how the hell did you know this? So there's brilliant people out there that can think up things that might be true, may not be true, who knows, right? It's good entertainment if nothing else, right? He says he goes through this apparatus, and being there is actually a very difficult process. It's not like all fun and games, according to him, which is very interesting. But it also provides constraints on his storytelling. If he ever gets cornered on a detail, he can just simply say, I didn't have that information. Well, you would think he'd be fairly compartmentalized. That's also not hard to believe. But again, I've heard him say, with his voice, with the camera at his face, that he was led into this facility the very first time. And again, I never heard him explain how the doors work to S4 until recently in this documentary. I'm glad he said something, because I was like, how do the satellite photos miss this, you know? Not that they, the map people would not help conceal it. But he says he's led into this warehouse in the side of a mountain. And I think the first time he said it, he said he literally had the ropes that you would have like a movie theater. And a carpet that went straight up to it, and he's walking up to it. And he tried to look sideways at the other 8 vehicles, which again he described as damaged initially. Didn't say anything about that in his documentary. He walks up to this vehicle, and again, there is no explanation for how they got the door open. How do you climb in the thing? How do you go from the middle chamber to the bottom chamber where these antimatter engines are? Was there a little, doorbell on the outside? I mean, no explanation of that. If you've heard that, you've heard more than I've ever heard, and I've watched probably, without question, 8 hours of this guy's interviews and presentations and people following up on those presentations, right? By the way, I want to clarify, too. I mentioned the Dr. Stanton Friedman. I've been saying Stanton, thinking it was his last name. I forgot that his last name was Friedman, so it's actually Dr. Friedman that I talk about, who died wanting to believe Bob, but not believing Bob totally. And again, Stanton Friedman, for me, is probably one of the most rock-solid ufologists in history. He was really cool. He really kept everything low-key. His optimism was always governed, which is good. So Bob, again, without describing how he gets in this vehicle, obviously the assertion would be that someone else had figured out how to open the thing up. That maybe if you capture it, the aliens open the door, and it's like, hey, don't shut that door. Put something in there, and they will keep the door open. As if the superior technology would be unable to circumvent any methodology we would use to control it, right? I mean, if it's super duper powerful, you put like an I-beam in there and it just crushes it, I don't know. Who knows, right? Apparently, according to the Roswell crash, you have some fragility in the vehicles. So what is the science behind this vehicle according to Bob Lazar? Well, he says there's 3 hanging antimatter engines in the lower section arranged in a perfect triangle, which makes, I guess, geometric sense. These hanging sort of cylindrical pods have antimatter engines inside them, of which Bob has never claimed to understand how they work. And he said that's truly the big mystery as to how this next thing I'm about to talk about, which is this element 115, would influence these hanging antimatter engines, right? What I don't understand is the following. I mean, unless you literally have the alien there talking to you and somehow and syncing your descriptions of, hey, I speak alien and you speak English and we're using telepathy to communicate, somehow they're able to discern the phrase antimatter. I'm skeptical that an alien would come up with the exact same description of matter in that realm. Maybe a man listened to it and went, oh, you know what he's talking about? He's talking about blue paint, So without opening these pods and looking inside of them, which would be the first thing you'd want to do, is dismantle remove one of these hanging pods from the vehicle, which means you'd have all the assembly mechanisms to take it apart, which I don't think he ever claimed that they did. You'd have to take the cover off and you'd have to look inside and see what's inside there. In the center of the second floor, you have this half dome. And under the half dome, which is a very important shape, according to Bob, you have this little slice of conical, vertically sliced 115. Now, what's interesting about this is that, to Bob's credit, 115 didn't exist in the physical realm when Bob broke this story in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s, excuse me. Since then, in 2003, they were able to synthesize a little tiny bit of this stuff. But according to Bob and his journey through this project, they said that they had manufactured or been given, acquired 500 pounds of 115. 115, as Bob has described it, because he's the only one that really gives it any mystery, is that it is a very difficult element to create because of it's sort of like saying if you were to balance a rock on the tip of a needle, you have to get it just perfect for that to ever occur. You know it's possible. As long as the needle can hold up the rock, you can make it actually happen. But you have to find, out of a random object, you have to find its perfect center point and get it to work, right? 115 on an atomic level is supposed to be so difficult to stabilize that it wants to be 113, 114, or 116, 118. It's supposed to want to move around. But once you get it, you have one of the most stable supernatural elements that's ever existed. Now, all of the elements in the periodic table of chemistry is based on its atomic count. And so synthesizing 115 in microscopic, subatomic levels, or atomic levels, I should say, like he said, he goes, look, you can create 1 or 2 atoms of this stuff. That doesn't constitute what he was playing with. He was playing with billions of atoms of this stuff, thus that he could hold it, right? According to Bob, and it's sort of a little sketchy, but you put a little bit of electricity through this thing and it starts to create sort of a river of ethereal energy, which is what everything's made out of. Sorry, Bob. But it goes in an arch throughout the body of this vehicle and goes down into those antimatter engines, and it essentially creates it would be like you've got some still water at the top of a hill, and the waterfall that's going to go down into a super slide and spin around and move around. It shouldn't have enough energy to do that, but with 115, you get this amazing release, sort of symmetry with the universe, in that it creates a pole. Once you create a pole of ethereal matter, you get what he calls a gravity wave, because it's going to affect what we call gravity, which is the collision with ether. Right. For those of you who are still hanging on to pull gravity and the phenomenon of gravity, go see my episodes on gravity. Go see my episode called My Ether Journey. All my ether episodes, you'll get up to date as to how the universe really works, and then what Bob is telling you will even be more amazing. But these hanging pods, then, according to Bob, the ship actually flies with its belly towards wherever it's going. But they also can swing at a 45-degree angle and create the waves to either side of the vehicle, which is why you actually can have the left and right movement. Not the most powerful configuration, because when they go left and right, you don't get this the analogy might be crossing the beams, as the Ghostbusters would say. You get a harmonic amplification when all three of them can go together, when they can cross their beams and take their lesser waves, compound them, get one big wave out of the bottom of the ship. So you're creating this gravity well where there's no ether in this bubble, either to the side or below. Now, how they talk about it being able to go up, just straight up, I don't get how that works. I don't think his designs actually work that way. Because you can't start pumping an ethereal, or I should say, let's use his term, gravity void straight up through the compartment where these aliens are supposedly sitting in these 3 seats without killing people above. Because you're made of ether. You can't have something mess with your supply of what you're made out of, right? So I never heard of any explanation as to how that works. That's just sort of been left out of the puzzle. So left, right, and down works great. Now, if you can rotate the vehicle up and then just go with the bottom towards whatever star you're going to or planet, that makes complete sense based on his theory. Now, and I modeled my UFO in the intro after his model. I took some of the curve out of the belly of it, because I thought it looked better that way. But the top appears to have what most people confuse, and this is according to Bob, which I thought was great, confused as windows. But they're actually sensors to tell the vehicle where it is in the star map of the universe, which is interesting. So what's strange about it is that he says it travels with its belly towards wherever it's going, but the sensors are on the other side of the vehicle pointing at the star map the other way. So you'd have to have technology that would drive you away from what you're trying to get to. It's just bizarre, right? So I'm not sure he's quite thought all this design out. Now, since his initial reveal of this 115, and this is what I don't understand. So this documentary was probably made, it takes a while to shoot a documentary, maybe 2017, and then, some in 2018, edit it, throw it out the door, and now he's been all over the place. And again, when you search on videos of Bob Lazar, you find 98% the documentary, and you can barely get back to his old lectures. The documentary filmmaker, whose name escapes me, it's the sort of the tattooed, bearded hipster guy. He does this big drama during the documentary where he's doing, speaker phone calls at this cool house he's staying at, and he says, I have called all these physicists around the world about 115. And they said that this is impossible to make and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, I went on a big 115 journey at my smoke lounge, all of us sitting in the room. We're looking at videos all about 115, and 2003 they synthesized it. Since then, they've made it over and over and over again through different techniques. So by the time this documentary was made, the phone call that he said he made and all these physicists he talked to would have said, yeah, we're making it. We're making it right now. We may not have 500 pounds of this stuff, but we make it. It's not a theoretical element anymore. It really exists. So how the hell did they get the science off in the documentary? Oh, because it's mysterious and a documentary has angles, right? So where does this thing end initially in the 90s for Bob Lazar? Well, I've heard him talk about this 4 or 5 times, and he never mentions the names of people that were there. But John Lear, son of the Learjet family, one of more than one son, who believes that every single bump on the moon is a space station, by the way. I mean, Bob Lazar, I swear to God, if you took a picture of a kid with bad acne and colored it black and white and gave it to John Lear, he'd think it was the moon. He'd show you where all the moon bases were, and it's like, no, it's just my kid's face. But he takes John Lear out there and his wife up on a hill in the Groom Valley area, overlooking the base on a particular day because he was given the test flight schedule. And they are seeing things, and they're filming things, lit things. Well, there's all kinds of wild drone technology being developed at Los Alamos Labs that's been declassified. You can see it. These drones fly at amazing breakneck speeds, man. Just right angle turns. I mean, it's phenomenal what they've been able to do. So he's showing it to them. He said he missed personally one of the biggest maneuvers that happened because he looked away to get his camera. The camo guys show up, the guys that take care of Area 51 security, and they are really pissed off that he's there, that he's brought pedestrians with them, non-military individuals. They all get arrested, but then they're arrested in the military, and then they all kind of let go because Lear's famous, Bob Lazar is part of this program, and just as a favor, they don't arrest his wife. The way the story goes is that, and you have to understand, meanwhile, he's running a brothel at the same time, because right after this whole thing breaks open, he gets busted for this brothel thing. And, technically speaking, imagine them throwing the brothel thing on him to make his life hell, and he had nothing to do with it. But he knows he can't fight the system, so he agrees that he did run it. He didn't run it. He does this 150 days community service, which doesn't seem like the proper conviction for such a crime. He's a felon, so they erase his ability to vote, to have a gun, all that kind of stuff. It could be a sting operation on him. Not really a sting, but a frame job, excuse me. So Bob is then told that this is a bit personal, but it was out there, that his wife was cheating on him. Basically, like, you want to hurt us, we're going to hurt you. Boom. John Lear has taken massive interviews at his house with the hell's that organization? I forgot the name of it. It's another UFO organization which does a lot of interviews. I apologize for not remembering the name of it. But anyway, they interview him, and he talks a lot about Bob's whole journey. And Bob had kind of gone into hiding at the time. He really wasn't hiding. He's doing his United Nuclear thing wherever he lives. Bob says, Bob describes a bunch of stuff that we already talked about. He does confirm that they were the ones watching this together, just the three of them. I think he was the one that revealed the wife cheating thing. Not his current wife, okay. I think they're married, the one that's in the documentary. Again, if any of this is wrong, it just comes off the interviews about this guy. One of the interesting things that John Lear talked about was, because the big question for Bob was, did you ever see an alien? Because that would amp up the story. You got to lie about a new thing if you're lying about this whole thing, so let's see where you go with this. According to John Lear, he said that one day he was walking down the corridor from point A to point B. He's not supposed to be looking left and right, ever. You're compartmentalized completely down to your physical journey between point A and point B, and that he looked into a window which had that security glass, with the barb, crosshatch wires in it. And he said that he saw two guys. This is second person. I think Bob actually recently was asked this on either Joe Rogan or somewhere else. I saw a recent interview with him, but he said I saw two guys in a white coats, like lab coats, with a being that looked like a gray alien sort of creature, but it wasn't moving, and it seemed to be almost posed, in that, would anyone believe this? So he thought, okay, maybe they're just designing beings that might fit in the vehicle. Seems like a stretch that they would be sitting there going, okay, let's give him almond eyes and little fingers. Like, why the hell would you care? It's a little person. It's a little being that fits inside this really tight space on the second floor, the primary floor of the vehicle itself. Okay, so he doesn't jump off on that, which is probably good for him. But Bob talked about the more that the story kept going and going, it's sort of the one thing that I thought evolved in the story, meaning he didn't say it initially, but it became a cornerstone of future interviews 10, 15, 20 years after the fact, based on the year 1990, was that he was brutalized psychologically. And the way that they describe it is that, or he describes it, was that they would hit him in the back, hit him in the chest with a like an M16, while other people were in the room. I'm missing one step. They gave him an injection which sort of affected his neural state. Could be a truth serum, could be something else like that. But they're hitting him in the chest and telling him that he never saw anything, that he never did anything, he was never here, and just trying to erase his memory through this sort of trauma, MK Ultra mechanism, right? Being attacked physically is never a normal event unless you've grown up in that world of some abusive environment where someone hitting you is like, whatever, I'm a boxer, hitting me is no big deal, I'm not losing my mind because you hit me. But an M16 butt in the chest would definitely, one, leave a mark, and two, wake your ass up. And so he said this was a therapy that happened to him every single day that he went there, which is why he sort of grew disgruntled with the whole process. Because for him, according to his own words, I'm paraphrasing, he didn't feel the need, he shared it with his wife and John Lear, but he didn't feel the need to run out and tell the world like he did eventually after supposedly being cut from the program. But after he's caught, he does get kicked out of the program. sort of one of these things that there has to be a repercussion. This is how I interpret it. There has to be a repercussion for bringing your friends out there. You have to lose your privileged past to appreciate your past. It's not clear whether or not they wanted to completely kick him out of the program, or if they had simply thought they had exhausted all of his research capabilities. He wasn't going anywhere at the project. I don't know. He never talks about that part of it. Now, the interesting thing with Bob is that he can claim at any point in time that he is stepping on the security clearance of the project. Meaning, if someone corners him, like me, hey, tell me how you got in the vehicle. Tell me, besides looking at things, just without touching anything, did you ever open up an antimatter engine? Did you ever get one removed? How did you guys do that? What tools do you use? Tell me more details about the inside of this thing besides this little story about 115. The story about 115 is the kind of stuff that physicists make up for their PhD thesis to get their PhD, Well, if we could do this, maybe we could do this, and that would be great, and we can make spaceships and anti-gravity with this element, but it's all just academia. It's not reality. So the only difference is you take it into reality by making a claim. Then everybody who wants to believe in this, which there are tens of millions of us that are extremely interested in the UFO story. Again, I should say, none of the skepticism I have for Bob Lazar affects my personal belief of Roswell. And again, I went in trying to disprove Roswell. I was so eager. You have to understand, man. I was so eager when I started my research on Roswell. I was like, I'm going to stuff this story up everybody's butt. I'm going to prove through sheer logic that Roswell never happened. And I found myself utterly incapable of shaking the story. Every one of the eyewitness testimonies, people who were either wives or best friends of the people that saw stuff as a second tier down, all their stories were very legit. Old ladies crying on camera that weren't selling a book or a t-shirt, didn't have a convenience store with an alien on the front, just terrified of what they saw, either personally or what happened to their friends. So now Bob works for his United Nuclear company. He has been busted a couple times, or at least one big time that took 3 years to resolve. Between 2003 and 2006, he got busted for bringing in some propellant for his fireworks that he's not supposed to have in the United States, so he got busted for that. What I don't understand is 2003 is 2 years after that day in 2001, where bad people were thought to exist and not the government doing it to us, right? So bringing in an explosive that's not supposed to be here in the United States seems like a stretch. That he would be able to get free from it. That's what I'm trying to say. They'd be like, oh my God, you're bringing in stuff that could be used to do some serious mass damage. I don't know what the substance was, but he got busted and they paid a $7,500 fine or something like that. Now, John Lear, in one of his interviews, he said that Bob was back in the project because he had disappeared out of John Lear's circle of communication. Now, according to the documentary, that has never occurred. He's never gone back into the program. Well, if you weren't in the program to begin with and never going back in seems like a logical place you'd be. You've never been there, well, you're not going to get invited back into a place you've never been. So, that's an hour of the recap, my immediate concerns about his story. But now let's go to the next tier of what could have occurred. It's on one level, it's a bit of a stretch. For those of you who are super Bob loyalists, I understand how this might rub you the wrong way, but listen to me for a second, because you have to understand I'm a fan of Bob myself. If nothing else, I'm a fan of the story. The 115 story, I think that's brilliant. The antimatter engine thing, it's brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant fiction if it's fake. So, let me throw this out there to begin with, because it's a real short sentence of what this could possibly be. Now, according to Bob, as a Joe Rogan interview, he said that two things that were interesting. I didn't see him say the second thing I'm about to say, but I saw him say the first thing. He said that when the question came up as to where they got all of these vehicles, and he said every single one of them was different, which, man, that begs a question. Is it 9 different civilizations? Is it like you knew them over the course of the years that they built this vehicle, and the fenders change, and the headlights change, and the interior changes, and the logo changes, just like some, Plymouth Fury or something? Some Chevy aging over the years. It's weird. But he claimed that one of the rumors that was going around his friends, and so here's the other question, like, how do you talk to your friends in a world where you're not able to look left and right? You're not supposed to be talking to your friends. What friends do you have? Where are they, right? I should say, too, there was a guy who did the background check on Bob that was supposedly located during the documentary, and he said, yeah, I did the background check on Bob Lazar. So that's a fairly decent piece of little evidence there. I don't want to miss some of these key points. But he said that these vehicles were rumored to have been discovered in an archaeological dig. That's cool. I don't know how all those sort of digs would be missed, by pedestrians today. You realize if anybody finds something like that today, everyone has 2 phones with them. 2 cameras on one phone. You snap the shot, you put it up on social media. Yeah, they got methods of wiping that stuff clean, but we have darknet, we have all kinds of people download to their hard drives, put them on RAM disks. It would be nearly impossible to get rid of a photo that was legit today. So I guess they're lucky they got all these things a long time ago. Then I read, I think in his Wikipedia or something, that he claimed that supposedly mankind has had a relationship with these aliens for more than 10,000 years. All right. We can barely track 7,000 years ago, let alone 10. So it'd be interesting to find out, generally where that theory would land. Again, just rumor on top of rumor. But now, this is a military thing. This is what's always rubbed me wrong about the entire story. And one of the reasons why I was initially skeptical of any story of any UFO anywhere in history, including Roswell. According to current day 2019 August disclosures, Russia, China, all of Europe, England, India, Australia, all these other countries have never captured a UFO. There are no rumors I am aware of, and enlighten me if you know. I don't mean to be an idiot, but I've never heard Russia say, oh yeah, we've got UFOs too. Oh, and by the way, here's a picture of one. Russia seems to be coming clean on everything that they've ever seen. So if this was a psyop, you got 2 different scenarios at least that could be true. Bob is one of them. They forged this story. He's really good at it. The guy gives maybe they teach Bob how to get through a lie detector test, which is not likely. Would have to be that guy was in on it as well, which there's no indication that he is. But Bob's holding on to this whole thing to make it look like, to the rest of the world, not only is America completely formidable with its amazing military, not to minimize any other military, okay? But we got alien shit. We got alien stuff, and we've been yanking all kinds of fiber optics and, microchips out of the technology. Velcro, which is a really funny thing because it occurs naturally in flowers. But isn't that a nice psychological weapon for our enemies? We got alien stuff. You can't do anything about it. Or Bob is harvest from some meeting somewhere. They do put him in a program, but it's 99% chemicals being injected in him, gun butts jammed in his chest, and through almost, maybe they even build a prop for him. Maybe they're just using technology they know he's never seen, so to him it's alien. And they inject in his mind a completely truthful story that he worked on a UFO, but it's all crap. Now, the lights he sees in the sky, they're drone technology. Again, drones are something you can buy today, but again, I've seen videos online of a warehouse with these amazing, like, spitting drones that are working on using propulsion systems I've never seen before, little spitty little engines. Who knows? Maybe, and a light in the sky can be really tiny but seem gigantic, Maybe they found a way. They're like, hey, man, we got this alien invasion plan, but we don't quite have it up there. But what we could do is trick one or two people into thinking this stuff is real if we just orchestrate it correctly. So Bob is getting programmed with an illusion. He believes it's real. Like, is it Bill Cooper said that, he saw what he saw off the side of a ship in the late 60s, like 67. He said he saw spaceships leave the ocean and then come down into the ocean. And he said that was real. Everything else I saw after that might have been fake. Who knows? But we have to accept the fact that maybe Bob was conditioned to believe this stuff. MKUltra is real. They paid reparations to some of the people that were harmed by the project, this secret clandestine project to create Manchurian candidates that will go berserk and shoot people. But what if you didn't make him a violent person? You just use the technology to inject fiction. You make him think he got his degrees at Harvard and Caltech, but he has no proof that he ever went there, not even for himself. He can't produce any alumni that remembers him. That's impossible. It's just impossible. And I'll just give you, it's like, nobody forgets me in high school. It's just high school, man. And when I went to high school, it was 3 years. Sophomore, junior, senior, right? I was a whiz kid at the computers. I was a whiz kid at physics and astronomy, trigonometry and geometry. I was extremely good at. Algebra bored the shit out of me. But whatever I touched turned to gold. It was like they remember me because I was the special kid. They may not like me. I don't know. But it's just the fact that this guy would put me to shame. He would put me to shame, man. And the fact that nobody remembers him, I got a problem with that. The other thing is that they pulled him out of thin air recently here. The buzz on the internet and all different realms, 8chan, 4chan, all these other social media, YouTube channels, is that we've literally been warned that the deep state will try to fake this alien invasion thing. So if you were going to release, let's just say that the sightings, because everybody has a cell phone now, the sightings of UFOs are actually at an all-time low. Now, I've read reports that it's completely the opposite, but it's like, okay, people in Africa have 4K phones now. If the sightings are going up, then where is all the footage? Right? It should be better than any footage we've ever seen. The only stuff I've seen is 3D art students doing 3D tracking shots like that one I did, pulling the UFO in the backyard. It's no big deal. You can mask out a building so that the UFO goes behind the building, goes back and forth, and all this other stuff. It's just trivial special effects that you can do with a laptop, all right, and free software called Blender 3D. Okay. But I've been involved with enough public relations situations that, when they release a movie, I've been on 2 different projects where I've been in movie studios where we're talking about how to create a campaign around a film to raise the awareness of the subject matter of the film, whether it's transhumanism or downloading your brain to a computer or whatever, to put out articles, buy articles, set up fake websites to get the consciousness of man up on these things, including like fake leaked videos of things. Like when Tron Legacy came out, there was a Comic-Con in San Diego, and the leaked trailer of Tron Legacy was a Disney employee filming the trailer inside Comic-Con and intentionally filming it and intentionally leaking it out to the web. Everybody rushed in because it was a secret thing you weren't supposed to see, and it was all set up. It was brilliant. So if you want to make a bunch of people believe that this alien thing is actually going to occur, you do anything you can to push it in the consciousness of man, including resurrecting Bob Lazar. Now, maybe that documentary happened completely organically. The guy that directed it, which I think he did a great job. I mean, it was a great documentary. So no, I don't have any bad feelings towards that at all, man. I don't have any bad feelings really towards Bob. It's just there's some explaining to do, as Desi Arnaz would put it. The other thing about the documentary was that there's this ongoing question that keeps going to Bob, and I didn't realize it, but it went all the way back to the early 90s, let's put it that way, like second or third interview. Supposedly Bob admits to somebody, maybe George Knapp or somebody, and this is what's kind of hard to believe, that he snuck out with some 115. Now, in the documentary, what was fantastic about his description of the 115 is he talks about how they layered a bunch of little discs up, and then they shaped it like a cone. They lathed it like a cone, and then they slice it down two sides to create sort of a slice of a cone. And that's the proper shape to then control the natural polarity of 115 as it reacts to sort of a piezo effect. You take a crystal and you harmonize electrical waves towards it, and it will start exuding one frequency. So if 115 has a piezo effect that's going on, but according to Bob, it actually messes with ethereal winds, thus creating gravity bubbles. You know, gravity is ether pushing on things and having negative pressure between things. Then it makes sense. It was brilliant. And when I saw that, I was like, whoa, touche, Bob. But Bob sat in the documentary and said, we don't know what gravity is. Okay, so you got a degree from MIT and a degree from Caltech, and you've never heard of Tesla's lamenting about ether and that it exists. He proved it, moves 50 times the speed of light, all the way back to Faraday, saying the same exact thing. Eric Dollard in the late 70s was able to verify it again using a wire in the RCA Navy radar laboratories. This guy has no knowledge of that, but he's got these 2 degrees. Well, geez, that's how smart you get going to those 2 institutions, and I'm glad I'm in my backyard. So here's what's weird for me. He's told people that at least somebody, that he brought some 115 out of this project. One, according to all of his lamenting about how much he was strip searched and pounded in the chest by guns, I mean, he would have to have, one, taken the most coveted substance on planet Earth, and what, he shoves it up his butt? How does he get out of the place? I mean, when you go to prison, they make you squat and cough, right? To see if you got anything in your cavities, your vagina, your anus, whatever. They figure it out. So I guess prison's the average jail cell down the street before prison even occurs has more security than this S4 place. I don't know. How did he get it out of the system? Is it a really teeny tiny bit? Don't know. But he tells somebody this very coveted thing. I got some of the 115 out of this place. And that person doesn't keep the secret. That person leaks it all over the place such that an average reporter, investigator, or whatever you want to call him, journalist, asks him in an interview in the early 90s, oh, I heard you got some 115 out of the place, and he won't talk about it. Okay. Now, because he was asked the same thing during the documentary. We'll get back to the documentary in 1 second, but let's look at the logistics of that claim. And in the documentary, they have raided his little shack that's part of his United Nuclear Group. And of course, he's saying, look, they're looking for the 115. But this is 2017, 2018, whenever they're shooting this thing. Okay, so let's do some math. 1990 takes 10 years to get up to 2000, takes another 10 years to get to 2010, and 07 more years. 27 years. I assure you, if the group that takes care of these spaceships in this secret bunker in S4, which is a mountain secret bunker, just like, Dr. Evil from Austin Powers, right? They would have descended on this guy. Again, he was asked the question in the early 90s. They would have descended on this guy in epic proportions. If they could not find this 115, but thought he took it, they would put him back in custody, and they would interrogate him and threaten him with his wife's life, with his friend's life, with his own life, with his whole future. He'd just be in the brigade forever, right? I mean, he would disappear off planet Earth until he coughed up this 115. They'd say, look, your whole life is over as of right now until you show us this 115. No such thing seems to have occurred. And why tell everybody the most coveted thing on planet Earth? I guarantee if I took 115 out of place, I don't know who I would trust with telling that. I'm sure it would bubble up out of you. You'd have to tell somebody, maybe, if you're one of those kind of people. Bob doesn't seem like he's one of those kind of folks, but I guess he was. But during the documentary, they have this weird place in the center of the documentary where he asks the filmmaker to go out into the woods. They gather up all the phones and put them out there. So the stupid thing was they went to where they were going to be and then took the phone someplace else and buried them in a box. And you would have to go way far away from that location before the military wouldn't be able to find it. But supposedly, they insinuate, I'm putting in what I think that they were trying to say, that he actually buried this 115 somewhere out there in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Why you wouldn't film it and then do that stunt blows me away. You want us to believe you got this coveted stuff? Hey man, you could probably just take some graphite and spray paint it pink or whatever, and who the hell's gonna know? It's going to be some little prop that makes everybody believe. They didn't go that far, but they supposedly gave a video testimony that's also being hidden on drives. Again, if the military thought this stuff existed and he thought that the documentary guy knew and the crew knew, oh my God, you go up to one of those guys, cameraman, you just say, look, how much are you worth? What do you mean? How much do you have in the bank? Oh, we already know. You're worth nothing. Okay, how's that cameraman job working out for you? Not so much? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you $10 million in cash. You can spend it however you want. It's not going to be reported to any SEC. You're not going to be bothered by it. It's just going to exist in this bank account. Here's a black credit card you can use to consume it. And we're going to make sure that you never want for a job. And whatever job you want, we'll go find it for you. You ready to talk about where you buried this stuff? Boom, they got it. There's a million ways, and that's not even a threatening methodology, right? They wouldn't even give the Groom Lake family that owned the copper mine that they stole all the land from to make Area 51. They wouldn't even pay them more than $4 million for the land. So they're probably going to go the violent route, which is what they did to that family. Now, let me tell you, if you guys probably didn't see the other show, MK Ultra Radio. I was able to break a story about the Groom Lake family, I guess 4 years ago now, on my other show, because the family, I know one of the proxy members of the family, and they told me that the courts had gagged them from telling the press that all their land, the remaining land that they had, was going to be eminent domained under the Obama administration. A lot of that happened under his administration. They were going to steal the land. The land was valued at least $30+ million that they were only going to be given $4. And again, the U.S. courts, the federal courts, said, you can't tell anybody we're fucking you. Great, right? But now, one part of Bob Lazar's story correlates with the Groom family story. This is interesting. I'm going to leave you on a little up note here to make sure you don't think I'm some complete cynic on everything. The family said that over the last, 50 years, the woman that told me this was in her late 60s, early 70s. I didn't know how old she was. Spent quite a bit of time with this woman over a couple years. She said that the family would wake up in the middle of the night with black suit people and military people pointing guns at their faces. So they wake up in bed and there's an M16 right at their face. They did it to the children. they also did this little maneuver. They hit him in the chest with the guns and told them what they are supposed to do. You know, you're to get out of here. We're going to kill you if you don't leave. Basically scaring them off their property. They also demolitioned with commandos the copper mine that this family was using to earn a tremendous amount of money. Not quite sure how that works, because I think copper is strip mined, which means it's a big open cavern, so I don't know how you mess that up, but supposedly got blown up and eradicated, so they couldn't make any money off of it without spending more money than the copper's worth to set it back up again. So I think that's very interesting that story was told to me way before I ever heard Bob Lazar tell the story about being hit in the chest with a gun. I think Bob also said that he was, the logistics of getting to S4 was that he would fly to Area 51 in a blacked out, windowed jet of some sort, maybe a cargo jet, don't know. And then he was then marched out of the jet on a tarmac straight to a bus that also was blacked out, and that the bus would travel to S4 and he'd spend the day there or whatever. It seemed like he said it was a daily thing, that he would come back the other route and then fly to some other Air Force base and then go home. I mean, at that rate, you're traveling for, I would imagine, a couple hours each way, 2 times a day. So it's a very, very interesting story. To recap, I've been a fan of Bob's ever since I saw it. Today, I'm a little more skeptical about the logistics of his claims of having all these degrees. It doesn't surprise me at all that if he did get those degrees, they were able to erase the records. Thus, the educational institutions and all the places he formerly said he worked says they have no record of him working there. It's a very legalese kind of statement, isn't it? But again, I got photographs of the 2.5 years I lived in Massachusetts. Tons of them. Tons of them. Supposedly no one pointed a 35 millimeter film camera at him the entire time he was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, going to college for either 3 or 4 years. I would think that you would go to probably MIT first and Caltech second for one reason and one reason alone. Caltech is better than MIT by a margin. Both of them are phenomenal schools, but Caltech is a place where they utterly harvest the students into these type of projects. I'm sure MIT is the same sort of thing, but in Massachusetts school systems are, when I was going to school there, I mean, I flunked 7th grade because it was so difficult, and I had to make up a class in 8th grade when I moved back to my home state of Kansas. But, you know, here I am acing all the other classes after that, and not all of them, but, you know, the ones I loved, it was A+ or A. But, yeah, so I would think that if you started your 4-year degree at Caltech, you would go get your graduate degree from the same exact school. Why move across the country if you're already at the best school in the world? Doesn't make any sense. And again, we have to come up with the money to pay for his education. The only other way to go to school without paying for education is that somehow your academic record is so hot, meaning amazing and phenomenal, that these schools are going to put you through a scholarship. Okay, you mean to tell me, again, proof, you have no paperwork of having gone through a scholarship program? Wouldn't that be the talk of the town? Don't you have in your life some kids that have gotten scholarships, and it's a big deal? The kid is so smart, they got a scholarship. I don't care if it's a soccer scholarship or an academic scholarship. This guy wasn't a soccer player, so it would have been his IQ. I think we have proof, regardless of how you want to spin this thing, that Bob Lazar is an extremely intelligent person. Extremely intelligent. So no one will take that away from him. That's his MO. He's always been brilliant. And he's also a doer. When you see him show off a jet rocket engine vehicle for entertainment, for money, again, I don't know how he does that and goes to college at these 2 different locations at the same exact time. That's impressive, man. Really impressive. He's also in that gray zone of legalese, right? If he truly created a brothel, which he pleaded guilty to, did his time for, 150 days of community service, then he's sort of one of those guys. What's a common denominator of scam artists? They're one of those guys. They have lots of those little things in their past. My hometown, some of the richest guys to ever go through my hometown that were sort of fly-by-night people, meaning either they grew up there and they were always kind of quiet, but they always had tons of money. They're driving the best cars. Their kids always had the best cars. They're going bankrupt every year off some new LLC that they've created. They're scam artists. They gang the system. We've had a few of those. All right. So sometimes that's just a methodology of these individuals. Don't know. I'm not accusing Bob of being, some dirty person or something like that, but it is interesting that he makes a decision where he's like, this is illegal, I'm going to do it. When you go to court, they try to attack your character. If this guy ever went to court fighting this issue, they just bring up those two cases of the explosives and the brothel, and he'd be done before going into, hey, prove you lived in Massachusetts for 3 to 4 years. I commuted. It's like. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I wanted to do a daytime episode for the first episode of season 5. I'm going to run back inside and work on the intro, editing that thing together. I've got, again, at least 12 night episodes, probably maybe 10 night episodes and 2 daytime episodes, I think. I've lost 3 episodes due to beautiful Final Cut saying it imported movies. Checked them, pulled out my card, checked the video, it's in the computer, and then the next day I come back and it's missing. So I don't know. Thanks, Apple. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, it's been spiffed up. Looks good on mobile, looks good on your computer. It's where you can find all the episodes. I recently have made some changes. I finally bit the bullet and unlisted all of the season 1 episodes from this particular channel because they have a lot of copyright issues. The gun control episode was banned worldwide. If that ever gets banned worldwide again, in the new channel I created for season 1, where it's all remastered, brand new intro, brand new icons. Actually, season 2 has got brand new icons, but took out all the pauses and all this other junk, cleaned them all up, balanced all the audio levels. Definitely go to the website to see season 1. The link's at the top if you just want to dive into the channel itself. No one banned me. No one took those down against my will. If you've embedded them around the world or linked them to your Facebook page, they're still going to work. They're just unlisted. You can't find them in the search. BitChute now has 1, 2, and 3 as of this recording. Season 4 is going to maybe take a little longer because they're all 4K episodes. So I'm going to see if BitChute will accept a 4K video. I don't think it does. I think it has a 1080p limit. If that's the case, I've got to post-process all the videos down from 4K into 1080p and then upload them all. That's going to take a year. But the website has 2 options for video, both the YouTube and the BitChute. Hopefully BitChute sticks around. It's actually a great platform. Brighteon turned out to be just a giant turd. It is absolutely censored by design. So I have no love for that platform. There's 2 options for your audio. Basically your Mac and your Android are all taken care of. So you got the links up there. There's 2 social media sites. There's the Twitter, which I just post the feeds to the videos. I don't do much tweeting. But we have a locked Facebook group, which is a great group of folks. It does, I will say that we've had some folks get perturbed about the content that's up there. All I got to say is, get some salve for your butt, because it's a fun place to be, man. Everyone's really tolerant of each other, besides a couple naysayers. There's a couple ways to contribute to the channel financially. So we have Patreon, which a lot of folks use. We have PayPal, which no one's ever used. A bunch of people ask for it, and I put it up there, and no one ever uses it. The intention of raising money for the channel is to bring on some other individuals. The fantasy would be to support myself 100% from the channel, which I'm not holding my breath. But it would be nice to have enough revenue to get folks to help me edit these things, maybe do a little bit of fun stuff on the side. Again, like I said, there's the link for the season 1 channel on YouTube, which is a different channel. If you're searching on anything Deep Thoughts Radio, just search on DTR and then EP for episode, and then whatever keyword that you want to search on. But in the website, we have a search field now. Just search on whatever turns you on. There's a bunch of categories there, so I've taken a first pass at categorizing a lot of videos. I'm going to be probably introducing another category over the next 6 months, which is demonetized. So every time YouTube refuses to monetize one of my videos, and I mean they demonetize the weirdest stuff, man, it's weird. But I'm turning off the attempt to make it monetized, and then I'm putting in parentheses at the end of the title, demonetized. So for those of you who like to read between the lines of what the deep state doesn't want you to understand, look for demonetized. I'll make that a category on the website over the next 6 months. It's a very meticulous process of me going through 450 episodes and looking at which ones are demonetized, and then going to the website and checking the checkbox to put it in that category. So it'll take a while. But anyway, hope you have a lot of fun with season 5. It should be a good ride. Till the next episode, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.